that you know you showed up just as well as you possibly could have in a way that might bring your personal values to life. But having motivation for good habits and actually maintaining them are two totally different things. John Maxwell has this unbelievable book. It's called The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And in it, he talks about motivation. He talks about habits. He talks about something he calls the law of consistency, right? And in that, he says, motivation gets you going. Discipline keeps you going, right? So it's one thing to be motivated, right? You can be on fire for understanding, oh yes, I'd like to create some consistency between who I say I want to be and how I actually show up. But it actually requires you getting into habits that you perform on an every single day basis to create the momentum that will keep you going. A habit is a thing that you can't just do one or two times. You've got to get in the habit, obviously, of doing it every single day. You'll never change anything until you commit to change on an every single day basis. So what are you going to change, right? Like I've asked the question before the break on just what of how your if-then statement, what your personal values are, might inform a little of what you need to change in terms of your habits. John asks it in a little bit of a different way in his book. John asks, there's 4 key questions that he asks. Do you know what you need to improve? Do you know what you need to improve? Do you know how you're supposed to improve? Do you know how you're supposed to improve? Do you know why you need to keep improving? Do you know why you need to keep improving? Do you know when you're supposed to improve? Do you know when you're supposed to improve? Right? Those are 4 very, very big questions. Do you know what you need to improve? Do you know how to actually improve it? Do you know why you need to keep improving? And do you know when you're supposed to do it? In order to answer those questions, I think you have to actually start at some of the science around habits, understanding what the heck a habit is and understanding how the heck a habit works. If you have not, I cannot recommend enough reading a book called Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It is, when people ask, like, Dave, what are the personal development books that you are into, or where did you start your personal development journey? Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg was the first book I read when I decided to take some action to change my life. It is life-changing. It is something that will fundamentally alter the way that you think about habits. And I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version in a way that hopefully does some justice to his work. But I want to encourage you to read the book. Also, on Thursday of this week that the Habits course is coming out, Charles is the guest on the Rise Together podcast. And in the Rise Together podcast, we have an almost hour-long conversation about his book, about the thinking and science behind habits, and it will be an unbelievable supplement to this conversation. I hope you listen to it. A habit is made up of 3 things, 3 basic components in a habit. There is the trigger or the cue, right? This is the thing that provokes the unconscious behavior, right? That 40 to 90% of things, Charles would say it's like 40 to 50% of things that are unconscious, but the half of the stuff that we do that we are not even consciously aware of doing, it is provoked by a thing called a trigger. Something happens and it makes you do something else. That something else is called the routine, right? The routine is the thing that we do after we have been triggered. So something happens, you are provoked, stimulus of some kind happens in your life, and then you do something. And the something that you do, that something is called a routine. Why do you do the routine? You do the routine because of the 3rd component of a habit. You are looking for a reward. You may not, again, be conscious of your looking for a reward, but you're looking for a reward. You have a craving of some kind when a trigger happens that provokes a routine that is supposed to, and having had that routine come out, provide you with the reward, the satisfaction to extinguish the craving that existed, right? Those are the 3 components. You have a cue, you have a routine, you have a reward. It is consistent in every single habit that you have, and it just acknowledging that those are the three components is the first huge step in making some progress in identifying which habits you have that are good for you and which habits you have are not good for you, and how to think about changing your habits so that you can turn not productive or bad habits into more productive or good habits. So here's the headline. You cannot eliminate triggers. Though you might like the idea of, oh, if I get a handle on habits, I'll just eliminate triggers. You cannot. You will be triggered no matter what. That is a part of humanity. And the fact that triggers exist is just a fact of life. So appreciate that you cannot change the triggers. You can tweak the reward, the way that you try to ultimately satisfy some of the trigger, and you absolutely can change the routine. So as you think about these three components, acknowledge that the trigger is not going to change. You're going to be triggered no matter what. How you respond to the trigger or how you feel the reward out of the way that you respond to the trigger, those are the things that you can truly affect, right? So the first thing that I had to do in trying to become more successful in how I create good habits instead of relying on bad habits or unconsciously just doing things that don't serve me or set me up to live into my personal values, I had to ask the question of when I get triggered. And in the book, Charles does a wonderful thing for us in outlining the 5 times when we most usually get triggered. No matter what, you're going to get triggered, but it's going to fall into one of these buckets. And why is this important? Because if you can understand when you get triggered, you can now turn something that previously, about half the time, was an unconscious response into something that maybe affords you a chance to consciously choose a routine that better serves you or think differently about the reward in a way that sets you up for success. So here are the 5 things, the 5 times when you get triggered. One of them is time, as in every time around a certain time of day, something in you is triggered, right? It may be when the kids are going to bed. It may be when the sun goes down. It may be when the sun comes up. It may be when your partner comes home from work. But whatever it ends up being, there is something about a specific time of day, right? If you are someone who finds themselves with eating after hours, a thing that they are trying to wrestle with and as a bad habit, well, time may be a trigger for you. The second one is location, right? Every time you find yourself in a specific location, you are triggered by something, right? So it could be someone's house. I know right now that's not an option because we are not leaving our homes, but it could be pulling into your driveway after work prior to quarantine, right? It could be when you walk into the garage because that's where your garage gym is. It could be a whole host of things, but location is a thing that triggers time and location. Number 3, an emotional state. There is something when you become anxious, when you become excited, when you become angry, when you become, right? When you tip into an emotional state of some kind, it provokes a routine that is, being engaged to create some kind of reward. Usually, right, if you have anxiety and it creates a routine, the routine is there to eliminate or reduce in some capacity your anxiety. The 4th is other people. Other people are a trigger. When someone comes around, every time they come around, you are triggered. By the way, it could be a positive trigger, right? Every time you see Noah Hollis, it triggers you to have joy because she's joy-filled. But every time your mother-in-law FaceTimes you, it triggers an emotion of some kind, right? So other people are a trigger. The fifth one is immediately preceding activity, right? The thing that just happened. Every time after this thing happens in your life, you are triggered in some way. Again, could be a positive thing, could be a negative thing, but immediately after you get out of bed, you go and brush your teeth because you're looking to get a clean mouth, right? Like that's a positive loop. But if every time after you've had a meal, you go have a cigarette because you're like, there's immediately preceding action can be both good and bad, right? But those are the 5 things: time, place, emotional state, other people, immediately preceding activity. Every one of your habits, both good habits and bad habits, are triggered by one of those things. And as you're able to, in identifying your bad habits, trace back where their trigger came from, now you've got a fighting chance to address that trigger in a more constructive way by changing the routine. I will tell you, right? Emotional state for me was a trigger when it came to processing all of the things that were happening in this last, I don't know, year, 2 years of us transitioning from Texas and working together for the first time and writing a book, and the way that my being triggered by an emotional state, anxious, overwhelmed, insecure, I was a person who was reaching for a drink to try and, that was my routine, I would have a drink to try and squash some of the anxiety or insecurity or overwhelmedness that I was feeling. And the loop, right? I would be triggered, I'd have this feeling, anxiousness, my routine, I would grab a drink, and yep, I would reduce my anxiety by numbing some of the way that I was processing that anxiety. What I had to ask, and I will challenge you'll have to ask about any of the habits you have that don't necessarily set you up for success, is the way that you're processing your trigger actually creating the kind of outcome that you're hoping for? And for me, when it came to drinking, I'm recording this 1 year into having decided to not have a drink, right? I had to a year ago when I was wrestling with this, I decided to challenge myself to not have a drink for a year. I wanted to show myself that I could make a promise to myself and that I could create a different kind of habit around the way I was triggered when I felt anxious or insecure or worried or overwhelmed. And so I had to find a substitute in my routine that would still produce the reward that I was looking for, feeling less anxious. And so when I felt anxiety, I started running. I mean, I ran a lot. I ran 1,000 miles this last year. So I ran a lot. When I felt anxiety, I would go running. Why? Because running was therapeutic. Running allowed me to process my anxiety in physical motion over a length of time in a way that actually allowed me to deal with the anxiety instead of suppressing and not dealing with the anxiety, right? I got to ask questions about where the anxiety was coming from and if the anxiety was actually real or imagined, right? I did it through a lot of journaling. I was actually writing out how I was feeling. I did it by raising my hand to people like my wife or my friends who, as close confidants, could hear the things that I was struggling with and either normalize some of what I was struggling with, offer tools to help me feel better, or challenge me to ask those questions of whether the things I was worried about were actually things I ought to be worried about. I got into community, and just in sharing some of my experience, felt so much more normal for experiencing those things in the first place. I got connected to gratitude on a crazy, crazy level, so that in really being connected to gratitude, I could alleviate some of the things that I was anxious for. I had a whole bunch of things that I did to change my routine when I decided that the response to my trigger, feeling anxious, did not serve me when drinking was the thing that I was doing to try and eliminate some of the way I was feeling. You will have to ask these same kinds of questions. Now, just because I found a better routine for my trigger, it did not actually eliminate the triggers. It didn't even reduce the triggers. In fact, my ability to find better ways of coping, positive coping mechanisms, actually increased my capacity to handle and process stress, to handle and process anxiety. I just found better ways to deal with it. And so I was actually able to handle it in a healthier way, but in a way that made the frequency of things coming at me sideways feel kind of normal. And so the great thing about creating good habits is that it will actually change your capacity to handle stress, to handle anxiety, to examine it in healthier ways. On the topic of drinking, because man, I get this a lot, I'm gonna talk about it for 2 seconds because it as a coping mechanism didn't serve me. And now on the other side of having accomplished this thing that I'm so stinking proud of, if you have a negative coping mechanism, one, you are super normal. So I just want to acknowledge that all of us have negative coping mechanisms. But in having taken something that was not serving me and turning it from something I had shame for into something that I have extraordinary pride about, I learned a handful of things and I want to share them because you implementing some of this new habit creating practice in your life will have you learning some of these kind of things as well. The first thing in my decision to change my relationship with alcohol for this year's worth of time, rewiring the way that I had a bad coping mechanism and a bad habit around processing stress and anxiety into something that was more productive, I learned that I can do anything. And one of the most amazing things about your decision to embrace a new habit and stick with it, when you make a promise to yourself and can keep a promise to yourself, you will create in the consistency of that habit an awareness of your ability to literally do anything. Having had a casual relationship with alcohol for 25 years worth of time, my ability to not have a drink for a year, that was a thing I did not think that I could commit to, and man, I did. Yes, I'm excited about it, but also in having done that, I know now that no matter what in my life I've done for no matter what length of time that I decide to change, I know I can do it. And you will build that same kind of acknowledgement, that same kind of awareness when you commit to something and stick to it yourself. The second thing, I learned that alcohol is not a local anesthetic. And whatever your version of alcohol is, it could be binge eating, it could be pills, it could be sex, it could be a whole host of things that you use to cope with whatever your triggers are. They are also not local anesthetics. You cannot mute the anxiety without also muting the joy. You cannot mute the feelings of unmooredness, the feelings of disorientedness when you are in the midst of the high seas without also totally taking away any of the benefit that might have come in the world of growth. I know this now, but I didn't know it then. I thought, oh, I'll just have a drink to take the rough edges off of a long day. The rough edges were the thing that were there for me to grow. And whatever it is that you're using to mute, to stifle, to suppress your feelings, those feelings may in fact be the path to an enlightened version of you. You need to honor those feelings. You got to honor that struggle. You need to sit inside of it because it's that struggle that's there to help you grow into a bigger, better version of yourself. I learned I had to find a substitute. I've talked about it, right? Whether it was running or journaling or community, I truly have an appreciation now for how important identifying the alternative when I can see that trigger and the routine that I'm doing. You have to understand what your routine is for the triggers. The routines that don't serve you, you've got to find an alternative that does, that can still produce the result that you're hoping for. I was able to see the byproduct to so many parts of my health in making this single choice. I'm going to talk in a second about this idea of keystone habits, but the domino rippling effects of changing the way that I was coping with alcohol and finding more productive ways to cope changed the way that my mind was thinking, changed the way that I processed things emotionally, changed the way I was able to physically become stronger, changed the way that Ray and I were able to connect intimately, changed the way that I was able to be more intentional in my spiritual practice, changed everything. And so if there is a negative coping mechanism that you're able to get a handle on, it's not just going to help you process that anxiety better. It's likely to produce a rippling effect with a whole host of other things because of the way that that single thing can act as a gateway for so many other good benefits inside of every part of your life. I was able to learn that owning my struggle gave me an unbelievable source of power. I took this thing that I had shame for, I turned it into something that I am so extraordinarily proud of, and talking openly about what I was up to and why I was up to it, the experience of where I was to where I am, has become such a source of pride in my identity. And whatever you're going through, there is no place here for shame. It does not serve you. It will not help you build better habits. Own your struggle. Become comfortable in knowing that your struggle does not make you weak. It does not make you broken. It makes you human. If there's anything at the beginning of my journey inside of developing myself and to where I am now, dang it, the humanity that exists in our universal struggle is something that connects us. And by becoming comfortable talking about the things that I have struggled with, it has fundamentally changed the way that I feel in control of and have power over the experience of that struggle.
You stay here.
All right, so here is the challenge for you at this point in our conversation. I want you to fill in the blank with some of the things that you know you could be approaching differently when it comes to bad habits that are currently keeping you from showing up as your best self, that are slowing your momentum, that have created the distance between who you'd hope to be and who you know yourself to be when you're falling asleep at night. And the sentence goes like this. When I am triggered by, you're going to fill in the blank. Currently, I, and you're going to fill in the blank, because I want to, because it provides me, fill in the blank, right? Those are your three components of a habit. When I am triggered by, fill in the blank, right? When I am triggered by, fill in the blank. So that might be the location, the time, the emotional state, the person, or the immediately preceding activity. When I am triggered by, fill in the blank. I currently, what is your routine? What is the routine that you are currently doing of a habit you know isn't currently setting you up perfectly for success? What do you currently do when you find yourself triggered by that thing? Because it provides me, fill in the blank, right? What is the reward that you are hoping for, that you're looking for when you do that thing? And here's why this is important, because you know that you're not going to be able to change the trigger. You're not going to be able to change the cue. But you can change the routine or you can tweak the reward, right? And so the more that you can just fill in those blanks, right? For me, with my drinking, when I felt anxious, I used to pick up a bottle because it provided me less anxiety. It muted my anxiety, right? So then I had to ask, okay, so now when I'm triggered by insecurity or anxiety or overwhelmedness, I currently, and I get to put different things in the blank, right? I currently write in my journal, get in community, talk to my wife or friends, go for a run, right? Like I have a different thing because it provides me a chance to process my anxiety in a way that actually addresses it instead of suppressing it, right? So I finished the sentence in a more productive way. And my hope is that as you are able to lay out how you handle things today, that you can, next step, change some of what you're putting in those second and third blanks to create a more productive outcome that you are in control of because you've now brought that habit into your consciousness. All right, we're rounding the bend, nearing.
Okay, I'm gonna actually stop it right there because I feel like that's like a good big segment of information. And I think he's about to move into another section. I'm actually not going to, I'm going to listen to the rest of the video, and I really urge the rest of you guys to listen to a video. I have new stuff for tomorrow, and I don't want to spend a third day just listening to this. So I really urge you guys to go and finish this video. I'm probably going to finish it after the meeting. Not that I love him, and I think he's great, but I think 3 days of just him might be a little much for Warrior Hour, just so you guys know. So I still urge you guys, it's still got, I mean, this is probably only about 2/3 of the way through. So we listened to about 1/3 of it yesterday, 1/3 of it today, and then there's still about 1/3 left as well. So I know that there's going to be good information in there, and maybe we can even like homework it, like watch it tonight, and we'll just talk about it tomorrow. But I've got new stuff for you guys tomorrow. So let's talk about this though, right? Let's talk about habits, bad habits, ugh. Let's not, right? Can we just skip this part and pretend I have no bad habits, right? Like, anybody else feel that way? Like, can we just skip over bad habits? Okay, so I love the questions that he kind of mentioned. I was just thinking that, yeah. I couldn't remember, I have to go back and figure out what book he was talking about that had these questions in it. If anybody happened to write it down, let me know. But it was do you know what you need to improve? Do you know how you need to improve it? Do you know when you need to improve it and why? Those were like really interesting questions to me. I felt like I was like, ooh, no, no, and no. Like, no, I don't know what I need to fix. No, I don't know how to do it. I don't know when I'm supposed to be doing it. The Power of Habit. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. Power of Habit by Charles somebody. Okay. Power of Habit. Cool. Thank you. But I thought those were really interesting questions because I don't know about you guys, but I was literally like, no. I mean, I probably did secretly, but I like suppressed it. Like, no, I ain't got nothing to fix. I've got no bad habits, like little angel, right? Like, but if I probably dug deep, or if I even just really was honest with myself, absolutely, I have habits that I could change, right? Like, if we were truly honest with ourselves, we know that we have habits that need to be changed. One for me, kind of like what he was talking about, you guys, or I have two that I still struggle with all the time, but I quit cigarettes about 4 years ago. And I still, every once in a while, randomly get cravings for them. It's very random to me because I don't have them. It's sometimes when we're in settings with like groups of people, I'm like, man, I want a cigarette for some reason, especially if we're like sitting outside or like where we're at, like a lot of places are like tiki places and like music's going and we're like sitting and hanging out with people and like, I'm like, man, I just kind of want a cigarette. But I always know that in my heart, I don't. So that would be like my first real big habit that I got rid of, I would say. And it was hard. It was really hard because of the triggers and the habit that I had created of when I smoked. So it was always right, like it was always specific times. So it would be like after we ate. It was funny that he said that, like after you eat, like we would go out and smoke a cigarette. This is before I, coached or anything like that, or even really cared about being healthy. So, but once I started getting healthy, I remember saying, okay, I couldn't even run. At the time, we were living at my uncle's property and he had like kind of a long driveway, and I couldn't run to the end of it because I wanted to run on the road, right? I was like, I'm gonna go for a run. And I like couldn't even make it to like the end of, yeah, my Uncle Tim. My cousin Amanda was asking me. Yeah, and so he had like a really long driveway, but in my mind, I was like, oh, I want to take like a long country run. I couldn't even make it to the end of the driveway, you guys, without dying. And I was just like, what the heck? Like in my mind, I was gonna take this like long run, and I couldn't even make it to the end of the driveway without dying. I actually ran back from the driveway and was coughing so much I thought I was gonna puke. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, you can't get healthy and run down this driveway and smoke cigarettes. I was just like, you just can't. I was like, you have to decide. You want to be able to run down the driveway or do you want to be able to smoke cigarettes? And there was a moment that I just said, like, I'm just not smoking anymore. Now, I still struggled with it, like, in the beginning of like still wanting them. And then we would kind of go out or something like that and I would have a few. But I really weaned myself off. And now I probably haven't had a cigarette in like 3 years, I would say. Probably 3.5 years. It probably took me about 6 months to fully like wean them out and not even really want one. I think like I remember my first initial like social setting where I actually didn't have one, and I remember feeling so proud of myself, being like, wow, I hung out the whole time and didn't want one, didn't have one. And I felt really proud of myself. And then from that moment, once I knew I could achieve it once, I could achieve it again, right? And I just would prefer, hold on guys, 1 second. So I would prefer to be proud of myself. And that's how I've always felt, you guys. I just prefer to be proud of myself than feel guilty about smoking a cigarette. And when it came down to it, when I decided to be a health coach, how could I tell people, hey, you got to go be healthy, and then I'm over here smoking cigarettes in the back of my yard? That just didn't make sense to me, you know, and it just didn't feel right. Okay. And so I've just decided it was more important to me to be taken as a professional health coach than it was in this little habit that I had. And so that was about 3.5 years ago. And then for the last 4 months, Mike and I have actually been sober as well. That was a huge step for us because a lot of you guys don't know, but Mike and I both come from lines of alcoholics. I think the only reason we even stopped really drinking as heavily as we did is because I had Derek. For me, I had slowed down a lot after we had Derek because I had to take care of a child. Mike really struggled still a lot with alcohol for a long time. Liquor, beer, you know, all of the above. And I'm gonna tell you guys a little story. But so at our wedding, during our wedding week, Mike's mom came down and stayed with us for a few days. And I love her to death. She is a full-blown alcoholic, okay? And I think it was very telling to Mike because she was in our home for several days at a time. And normally he would be around, like she had been an alcoholic all his life, but he was also in and out of foster care and group homes all the time because of it. So he struggled a lot growing up. He never really had like parental figures. So anything that he knows is probably a learned experience. He's probably learned the hard way. But so he's never really spent a lot of time with his mom as an adult. So she came down for our wedding and she was here for several days. And he watched her get up, and by 10 a.m., you know, she had a vodka. And it was heartbreaking to him to see his mom need that, like with breakfast, you know? And then also, you know, she's 52. Let's see, he's 36. She had him when she was like 16, or whatever that age difference is. I think she's like early 50s. She looks older than my mom, who's 65. You know, like my mom's wakeboarding. My mom came out and she like wakeboards with us. You know, and like he's just looking at his mom like, you know what I mean? And I don't tell you guys this to like talk bad about her. I just tell you guys this because this is like real life shit, and I want you guys to like understand kind of where it's coming from. Yeah, she's 65. My mom's 65, dude. She's killing it. But I think it was just like a really it was a very big eye opener for Mike. And so we had got married New Year's Eve, this past New Year's Eve, and everybody kind of went home after the wedding, and he just looked at me and he's like, I just don't want to drink anymore. And I was like, okay, well, talk to me. I was like, because I got a bottle of vodka in the fridge. Do I need to get rid of that? Like, what do I need to do with that, you know? And he was just like, you know, when it comes down to it, he's like, I don't want to be my mom. You know, he's like, as terrible as it is and as good of a person as she is or can be, she's not when she's drinking. She's just not, you know? And the thing is with Mike, he's like, I can't just have one either. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the person that can, oh, let's just go have a few beers and then we go home and then we're done. He's like, in my blood, the moment it touches me, my goal is to escape, to not remember going to sleep, you know? And he goes, I'm recognizing that, and I don't want it to be me anymore, you know? And so it's interesting of how you guys, it can be a process. Oops, sorry. That it can be a process as well. Okay. So like, it took us you know, Mike and I have been together for 8 years this summer. I would have never, ever in my life thought that he would have given up alcohol when I first met him. No freaking way. You guys, Mike is one of those, like, I'm talking like lots of alcohol. Like, we would go through like a handle of vodka a night, like easily. No, like no questions asked, you know, and wake up and do it the next day as well. And it was just really bad, you know? I mean, like, that's not good. And I wouldn't say, like, it's been a couple years since like we really drank like that, but even just being here in the Keys, where like literally they have a saying, it's called the Keys disease, where when you move here, because it's a party island, so everybody comes here to vacation. So if you actually move here to live here, you get caught up in the Keys disease, which is alcoholism. It's literally alcoholism. And it's just because everybody parties all the time. There's always something to do. There's always an event or a party or, you know, people vacationing. Just like when I used to live in our old house, we used to have a vacation rental right next to us. And every single week it was new people. And every single week they're like, come over, we're just hanging. And I'm like, yo, it's Tuesday for me. I'm not on vacation. Like, I'm not going to be drinking mimosas at noon by the pool. Like, it's just Tuesday for me. Like, you know, and you can't fall into that when you live here, because if you do, you're going to get sucked right into it, because it's every week, every day. And we kind of fell into that even just when we first moved here, because you're all excited. You're like, yeah, you know. And then there was a point where I was like, okay, but if we want to make it here, like if we want to live here long term, we've got to get our shit together. We can't be out partying with people on a Tuesday because we got to work on Wednesday, you know? And so it was really cool to even see coming around to this year and like our first year of marriage, even of it being a sober year for us. And it actually, like, you guys, in the last 4 months, we've made so much progress in the way we communicate, because we're not, like, we're actually listening to each other, you know? Like, I don't, a lot of times, like, at night, like, we'd be having a couple drinks and having an intense conversation, and how many times did that conversation get out of hand because we just, like, weren't really listening to each other, or because I had a little buzz and I thought that I was, like, gonna, like, put him straight, or I'd be like, what'd you say? You know, like, you just know, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. If you guys, like, ever just drink casually with your husband, how many times it's probably ended up in an argument because of misunderstanding, you know? And it's because you're numbing your actual feelings. It's because you're escaping from those actual conversations, okay? But those conversations are going to happen anyway, you guys. That's the thing, is then we get a little liquid courage in us. So those conversations come up anyway. The conversation I was trying to avoid comes up anyway. And then it's skewed and fogged by the alcohol, right? And so it's been really interesting to me to experience Mike and I sober. Well, I've never done it. It's 7 years, you know, or almost, you know, going on our 8th year now. It's like, wow, we're like a totally different couple. Yep. Thank you. I will eat that. Thank you so much. Derek brought me a Go-Gurt.
Yogurt, not
Well,
Go-Gurt.
okay, yeah, it's yogurt. It's on the go, so it's called Go-Gurt.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Go-Gurt?
Okay, I'm almost done. A couple more minutes, okay?
Mom,
Yes.
can
Don't
I-
try and think of something. Don't try and think of something just because you're here.
Dirt.
In just a minute when I'm done, okay? I'm almost done. Hey, no. Okay, so don't repeat me. Does anybody else have a toddler that is in the freaking repeat stage? It's like insane. Anyway, hey, I'm serious. You're not gonna do that. Go. You're not gonna do that. Go. Okay. You're gonna get in trouble.
I'm putting a puzzle.
You're gonna put the puzzle together. That's fine, but you cannot repeat me. Okay.
You cannot repeat.
Real life, guys. Real life here.
Really?
So, all right. So I'm probably not going to talk about it much in front of little guy, but you guys understand where I'm coming from. You guys understand maybe if that hits home, or maybe it's not necessarily alcohol, but maybe it's something else. Okay, maybe it's something else you're using to escape feelings. And so I thought this was really great to kind of expose some of that stuff, and also validate some of the things that I've been doing also. Make me feel like, okay, we are working in the right direction, you know, or that thing I've been thinking about that I do need to give up does need to give up. you know? Maybe you've been contemplating some things that you're like, I know this is a bad habit, but I haven't quite found something that's going to actually make me give it up. You know, that's the thing too, is like, you guys, sometimes we hold on to those habits for so long, we feel like they're part of us, right? Like, who am I without this in my life? And if this is so prevalent in my life, what am I going to do to fill that gap? Especially things like alcohol, because what are we going to do at night instead? You know, if you're having a few drinks or something like that, how can you keep yourself busy? Like, you know, and so we got to find something to kind of place in there. And I love that he said, hey, instead of reaching for the bottle, I reached for my iPad or my iPod and went running. You know, does anybody even use iPods anymore? Like, is that still a thing? But like, you have to find something to replace it. Okay. And don't replace it with another bad habit. I feel like that is what a lot of us probably struggle with the most, is like, oh, okay, I'm no longer going to drink liquor, but now I'm just going to drink beer. You know, we pull those kind of tricks on ourselves, like, oh, this is so much better. This is a better choice, you know? Or, oh, I'm just going to make a mixed drink, but I'm only going to put a little bit in that. I can't even taste it. Then why do you even have it in there? Why? What are you escaping? What are you trying not to deal with, and why? How are you going to fix it? You know? And so I really love this chapter. I thought it was really good, especially you guys right now in quarantine, because those bad habits can trickle in, right? Like, there's been times where Mike and I have talked. He goes, man, I just feel like I want a few beers. And I'm like, yeah, but why? He goes, I don't know. I was like, habit. We just habit, boredom, you know, and we just start falling stress. Absolutely. Like, those things start trickling back in, and they start eating at us too, you know? Like, hey, I'm right here. Hey, it's day 30. You're still holding strong. Are you sure? You know, like, it's going to tempt us to get back in. And we have to find the strength and courage and almost like the big enough reason why we don't. Like, your reason why you don't has to be stronger than why you do, right? Like, you have to have a bigger reason as to, this is more important to not do it than it is to do it. And so we have to find that way. And I love like all the little like tricks and trades that he kind of like helped us. And I feel like there's probably more if you listen to like the third part of the video. So don't skip that. They only do one video a week, so you have like the rest of the week to finish the rest of the video. But I just, at this point, you guys, when we get off here, like, what's your bad habit? What's the trigger for it, and why? I love that he asked that. So I want you guys to make sure that you guys write that down. So what's your bad habit? What's the trigger? What causes you to, or whatever, you know? And why? Why is it doing that? Okay. Sorry, this tablet's about to die, but we're good. So I love that. I love that he said like the 3 components of trigger, or like the 3 components of it is like trigger, routine, and reward. Like, think about it. It's like your trigger is your stress. Your routine is to grab for that beer. The reward is, oh, this is escaping me from it, right? But it's not, because tomorrow when you wake up hungover, it's still there. But now you're fogged brain. Now you're dehydrated. Now you're, you know, like kind of maybe fiending for more alcohol, you know, because alcohol induces more alcohol. It's just the routine. And so now it's even harder to deal with it. Okay. So we have to be able to identify our bad habits, though. That's the hardest part, I think. Like, honestly, I think that's the hardest part, is just admitting that I have a bad habit, you know, and then actively working towards getting rid of it. That doesn't mean it has to happen in a day, you guys. Like I told you, it took me a while to actually get rid of cigarettes in my life. But that's the kind of person I am. Mike's more like cold turkey kind of person. Like he's just, I don't know, it's like that's a guy thing or something, but like he's just like, nope, no more. And I'm like, well, can we have like 4 today and 3 tomorrow and 2 the next day? Like, you know, I'm more like, let's wean off of this. And he's like, boom, done. And I'm like, what? But I love that about him too, though, because when he decides something in his mind, it is literally like game over. That's the decision that's been made. And I always really appreciate that because I'm not like that at all. I'm more like, well, can we have some stipulations? Can we have some like clauses over here on the side? Like he's just like all or nothing kind of person. I think that is just like a guy trait, is like an all or nothing kind of thing. Girls are a little bit more like gray area. And so, but I think we need that, you know, like, I appreciate that from him because I feel like I need that. I need his all in so I don't go, you know? And so I really appreciate that. And I hope you guys do too. Maybe if you guys have a spouse or something like that, if guys are like that for you, because sometimes it can get annoying, but what if we could actually start appreciating it? You know, like it's all perspective is how I just always try to remember it. It's like I could be annoyed by it or I can just like really appreciate it, you know? Let me see what else I wrote down here, if I wrote anything else that I thought. Oh, I love it. Like, you guys, if you're gonna promise yourself, keep it, you know? Like, make yourself proud. Like, if you're gonna make a promise to yourself, show yourself you're capable, okay? Because the thing is, you guys, the moment, because you are capable, that's the thing. You know, in your body, in your bones, in your soul, you're so capable of getting rid of that bad habit. Absolutely capable. It's a choice you have to make, and it's something that you're gonna have to continue to choose every single day. I still have to continue to choose not to go get alcohol. It's not like, oh, we just said that in one day and now I just don't even think about it or whatever. Like, it's something I have to continue to choose every single day to stick with my new habit rather than my old routine, right? And as it's gotten longer, though, it's gotten easier. I mean, I still have hard days where I'm like, oh, maybe we could. And then I'm like, no, nope. Not at this point, because it's been 4 months, you know? Yes.
Last time, they said it's body, and this guy said,
I know. Can we talk after this? Finish your.
Yeah,
Ooh, look how good you're doing on that puzzle. You're so close. All right, ladies, I am actually going to let you go because I think it is 9:05, and I feel like that was a lot of heavy stuff today. And that's going to happen every once in a while, and that's totally fine, you guys, because every once in a while we just got to dig deep, right? You were good until you keep talking over me. So please don't talk when I'm talking, okay?
Mom, why are you the funny things? And I want to show
He's
you
so funny.
where the tooth fairy comes from.
Okay, you can tell me in just a second, okay?
It's from the tooth fairy world.
Awesome. All right, ladies. So that's some deep stuff to think about. That's
Love
some.
you.
We love him too. I love you too, dude. But definitely some heavy stuff to think about. And you guys, maybe your bad habit isn't as bad as like drinking alcohol every day. You know what I mean? Like maybe your bad habit is you just want to work on like not having dishes in your sink by the end of the day. You know, like maybe that's your bad habit you want to work on. It doesn't always have to be like super intense, okay? But you can use these things to train your small habits too. Like, I would rather wake up, you know, with no dishes in my sink. So in order for me to do that, I'm gonna have to do them before I go to bed, you know, and then I'm gonna feel proud of myself when I wake up and the sink's all clean. You know, it doesn't have to be as deep as like alcohol and cigarettes and stuff like that. We could have all these tiny little bad habits that we want to fix, and we can use this same process to help fix those little triggers. Because I know when I wake up and I see all the dishes in the sink, it triggers stress in me. which then probably makes me reach for something else. But if I can back up and realize that my trigger is a sink full of dishes, then I can make sure that I do all those dishes so that way I don't have to have that trigger.
You love it?
I do love it. It's awesome. You're good at those. Oh yeah, it's because you gotta kind of hold it flat like this so it stays. Here you go. So,
And where do you get these?
where did I get these? You know what? Brittany got these for me. She's right here. She's right here. You want to say hi? She made them. Yeah, it's cool. He's so funny. All right, ladies. Hopefully you guys kind of got something out of that. Even if, like, you know, one thing, you guys, even if it's one thing that you got from there, then it was worth it. And make sure you guys go and listen to the rest of the video. I'm actually going to press play after this and just go ahead and sit down and watch the rest of it. And just make some notes, because now that my brain's kind of on habits, I kind of just want to keep feeding into it. So if you have the time, go ahead and just continue finishing the video. But if not, you have until Monday until the next one's released. Cool? Am I missing anything? Oh, actually, do you guys mind if I take like a little picture here? I think Tennille couldn't make it today, so I want to make sure that I get a picture. I usually just share hers, but hold on. Or maybe I'll take a video. A video is so much easier instead of trying to like swipe and take a picture of each person. Okay, we're videoing. Hi, ladies. This is Warrior Hour. Yeah, I see faces. Happy faces. Thank you, ladies. Woohoo! All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. I gotta let people know I'm working over here, right? All right, have a good day. I will see you guys tomorrow at 8, okay? Bye.